Welcome to the Esoerotic Dark Feminine Magic podcast. My name is Crimson, creatrix of Esoeroticism, and I help mystically minded folks awaken their dark feminine magic. Welcome to the portal of enchantment. Hello, it is a solo episode with me, Crimson, and today we are going to be talking Chaos Magic witches. So it's the Esoerotic Dark Feminine Magic podcast, and I've been promising you a solo episode purely on magic, although I can't not talk about the movement and the embodiment and all of that. But today, specifically, we're focusing on how that integrates with magic. So, as far as I know, as far as I am aware, we are the only modality that alchemizes sensual, embodied, erotic expression with a ritualistic, ceremonial, magical technique. That's what makes us the one and only, so unique. And it is also why, through esoeroticism, we are focused on internal transformation versus external physical transformation. And it all started back when I found this style movement. So I found my sexual erotic expression through pole dance and floor work and striptease. And that was back 2013. And around that same time, I was real deep in the world of discovering my magic and my witchiness. And I was real hot on chaos magic at the time, still am. And what I realized was that as I was integrating chaos magic and its techniques into my life, into my spells, into my rituals, that it could apply to my dance and my movement, that they did not have to be separate. And I recognized that when chaos magic techniques were applied to my dance, my movement, my embodiment, that there was some profound shifts happening. And then I recognized that when they weren't being integrated, that I was still enjoying the practice, but it was more from a performative or a physical transformational perspective, which we love both, right? But esoeroticism is very much a transformational internal. Eso means internal. It is an internal modality that we use our sensual embodied sexual expression in order to experience internal transformation. So let's talk about the esoteric of esoeroticism, namely the chaos magic. So chaos magic by design is meant to be undefinable. What? And I know that is so confusing to a lot of people, especially those raised in dogma, especially those who are used to religion or dogmatic spiritual practices that tell you we have a unified belief and practice. And this is what we believe. This is what we say. This is how we practice. This is what happens when you do XYZ. That is what chaos magicians were actually fighting against when they created this practice. And so here's the story. Here's the backstory. This is not some ancient practice. Chaos magic was founded in the 1970s, all the way back to the 20th century. And essentially it was just a bunch of dudes who were practicing ceremonial magicians. And ceremonial magic is things you may have heard of, like Thelema and Golden Dawn, and these organizations who have these initiatory groups. And you come in and you go through the levels and you learn to say these words in this situation, and you're going to invoke these deities, and this is what you have to abide by. And they thought, why is this such a drag? I don't think they used those words, but essentially they were like, I don't know, why does it have to be so rigid? Why do we have to do exactly what we're being told in these groups, when essentially we understand how magic works. Like, we get it. We've been studying this for a while. We've been practicing this for a while. Why can't we essentially just use our own knowing combined with our own creativity and make our own rituals and form our own sense of magic? And that's exactly what they did. So they recognized that the word chaos does not mean that it's chaotic. It does not mean that it is haphazard, that it's half-ass. No. So what the chaos and chaos magic is speaking to is the chaotic nature of the universe, meaning the unpredictability, the energetic flux of the universe. We live in a chaotic universe because there is no static predictability, because of the energetic flux of the world around us. And therefore they said, we want to work with that. We understand that we live in endless possibility because of the chaotic nature of the universe, the unpredictability of the universe. And we want to use our magic to insert our will within that, which is pretty cool. And they said, and we want to do it our way. It, to me, is the most sovereign magical practice, because it requires you to show up and not be told what to believe, but to actually do the work yourself, to gain the wisdom yourself, and then apply it in a way that resonates. And so it requires, for one, a chaos magician would have to play with different forms of ritual and magic and see what works and see what doesn't, and continue to develop their own personal practice based on that. Chaos magicians pull from different disciplines, and it's, even though they do not have a unified structure, they do hold some common beliefs. And that belief is that magic happens when we are able to enter a state they call gnosis, Gnosis, entering a state of gnosis. And they believe that it is through entering this state of gnosis that they can then implant their magical intention, and that their magic is cast from there. They believe that essentially, as is within, so is without. And so you may have heard that magical axiom, and I'm going to get to the scientific support of it in a moment, but just to keep on the magical thread, why magic, right? Why magic? Because we're trying to move beyond the mundane, and the mundane is the conscious world. But they recognize that there are ways to move beyond the mundane, and that meant we need to bypass our conscious self in order to access the magical world, which is the subconscious self, the sub rosa, the below the surface. And they recognize that, if we can instill intention in this state where we bypass the conscious self, that is where we implant the magical seed, let's say, that then will grow and flower in the external reality. And this is going over to science, very much supported by the idea of neuroplasticity, the idea that if we can change our internal selves, that we can, especially in neuroplasticity, they do a lot of work in the brain. I will argue that the subconscious is not just in the mind, it's in the full body, that we store lots of old stories, emotions, energies within the actual physical body itself, but that it is also subconscious. We don't recognize it's there. But what they realized is that if we can get to this subconscious state, we then, as chaos magicians, can use an endless amount of different creative techniques to instill our magic. And we actually don't need to just get into the state of gnosis in one way, that there's like what I love about them, there's not just one way. There's like lots of different ways. Have you ever heard that idea that like it all comes back to a common truth? And that's kind of where they are. You can use this technique or this technique, and you can do it in this way or this way. It's gonna work if you understand the essence of how magic works. And so let's talk about gnosis real quick. So gnosis, they have divided into different categories: excitatory, inhibitory, and cheminosis. So cheminosis is using like drugs and different like earth medicines. And I recommend to bypass that, because if you are dependent on some kind of chemical, natural or otherwise, to access your magic, you're really limiting yourself. So excitatory, inhibitory. There essentially are you using inhibitory gnosis, which is getting yourself into such a state of, you could think of calm presence, that you have this ability for the conscious to simply dissipate. And so things like meditation, things like breath work, things like mantra chanting, things like asphyxiation, things like very dull forms of BDSM, dull pain. These are all that kind of, think of hypnosis, where you get into that state where all of a sudden you are in the subconscious, and that you have essentially allowed all the thoughts and the distractions of the world just float away. And so when you are in that state, you are in access of the subconscious. Now, another way is excitatory gnosis. And this is when you overwhelm the system so much that essentially the conscious goes to deal with that overwhelm. And you are then again in this present state with your subconscious. It's all about being in a state of embodied presence, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. But this is done by techniques like drumming, like outward chanting, like ecstatic dance. This is things like orgasm. This is why sex magic works. And this is maybe more extreme techniques like fear. Do you see what happens in both of these inhibitory and excitatory forms of gnosis? Essentially, you are finding yourself in such a state of presence that your thinking mind, your conscious mind, is gone. And that's and there's the magic of it all. But that's actually more difficult to achieve than one would think. But that's why when you think of like certain spiritual ceremonies, you'll see a lot of drumming and chanting and singing and dancing and wildness and like basically they're like inciting this form of, they wouldn't call it gnosis. That's a term that the chaos magicians coined, but it has existed in so many different forms of spirituality and in different therapy techniques as well. And so essentially what happens when you get in gnosis is that you find a state of embodied presence where you're not thinking anything, where you are not distracted by anything, where you are in a single point of focus. And it is in that point where the magic happens. And it is so rare to get into these states because we're overwhelmed. We're moving through life. We need our conscious mind to protect us. But you are in an active state of doing something when you are in gnosis. So this isn't necessarily like when you're sleeping or when you're zoning out. So when you are dropped into the state of gnosis, essentially the magic is instilled by what you are feeling and experiencing in the moment. Okay? And a lot of people confuse chaos magic with sigil magic. And I've seen people teach, I'm going to teach chaos magic. It's sigil magic. No. And it's not sex magic. Sigil magic can be a form of chaos magic. Sex magic can be a form of chaos magic. The most, I think, common chaos magic spell or ritual is to create a sigil or just an abstracted symbol that represents your intention, and then look at it as you're wanking off. And then when you reach a state of orgasm, you reach that state of gnosis, and as you are essentially taking in that sigil, that is what is being implanted into your subconscious self, and that is what essentially is then becoming your as is within, so is without. So I think we're all aware of the fact that there is something to the subconscious, right? And this is why this is why we have magic to begin with. As I said, we use magic to move beyond the mundane. And the mundane is the conscious. And so let's use esoeroticism as an example. So say you want to you want to reclaim your sexual sovereignty. You're like, I am so empowered by my sexuality. Some conscious, mundane ways that we could go about that is by reading books, listening to podcasts, wearing certain outfits, talking a certain way, speaking a certain way. These are all conscious, mundane techniques, and these are not forms of magic, and they are not going to actually create the deep-seated internal change actually required to see your desire to become your reality. Where true change happens is subconsciously, sub rosa, so underneath. And so this is where esoeroticism comes in, because you could consciously be saying, and I am this, and trying to claim these certain things. However, if your subconscious self has beliefs that, well, no, my sexuality is shameful and my body's for other people's pleasure, and I fear actually it's not safe to be sexually expressive, it's not safe to be in my body, that is your truth, that is your reality. And no book reading or podcast or mental masturbation is going to change that, because it's deep seated. So we need to create new stories, rewrite new realities through the subconscious. Then as is within, so is without. And then that becomes our new truth. And then our external reality changes. So I mean, and this is why we do so many different forms of magic. You can apply this to anything. I want to be rich. Well, this is where what are your money blocks? That's when you're going and you're doing the subconscious reflection, but you also have to do the internal work to rewrite the story, because you could say, oh my gosh, I have blocks to money because I think rich people, I had a rich neighbor and he was a real asshole. And so I don't want to be equated with that. So I even though consciously, externally, I want to be rich, internally, I think rich people are assholes. And who wants to be an asshole? We need to find ways to rewrite that inner narrative, to release that narrative. And the best way to do that is to rewrite it. You can think about it as a reprogramming, but that can sound a little triggering. So you're simply just choosing to rewrite your reality as you desire it to be. So hopefully that makes sense of how, like, the conscious versus the subconscious. And then, so you may be like, all right, so like how you get in this state of gnosis, and then what? And then what? That is kind of the difficulty. Well, you need to get into that state energetically, emotionally, feeling wise, that aligns with what it is that your intention, what aligns with your will. And so going back to esoeroticism, this is why the embodiment, the dance, the movement is, like, to me, the most powerful way to do magic, because you can use your dance and your expression to feel a certain way, but you don't have to think about it. So going back to our example of, well, I want to reclaim my sexual sovereignty. I want to reclaim my bodily autonomy. So in esoeroticism, we are guiding as an esoerotic guide. Let's say I have all of these different chaos magic inspired ways that I create space, that I format classes, that I lead people into their dance and their movement. And I teach this in my Esoerotic certification, by the way. So I'll remember to talk more about that at the end. But this is something that I have trademarked and that I'm happy to teach you. But essentially, when in a class, when I can get you, the whole point of an Esoerotic class is to get you into a state of gnosis. I call it Esoerotic gnosis, because it's in that state where all of a sudden your conscious mind is gone and you are so in the moment, and essentially you are going through a spell or ritual where you are rewriting your subconscious to believe that whatever it is you're feeling and expressing in that time, namely, this body is mine, this sensuality is mine, it feels safe to express my sexuality, my body feels good, this is for my own pleasure, it feels safe to be in my body, etc., etc., etc. And when you're in gnosis and you're feeling, expressing, and you're doing this movement modality in this state of gnosis, essentially you are rewriting your story, your false narratives that your body's bad, your sexuality's scary, blah 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 blah. Make sense? So I just explained how esoeroticism is a form of chaos magic and essentially how that spell works. With chaos magic, you can use so many different techniques. You can craft so many that it's literally endless, the amount of spells that you can create, as long as it is based on how can I bypass the conscious self to access the subconscious self, and how can I use my creativity to implant my intention. I gave you an example of a really popular chaos magic spell that's to create a sigil and to wank off to it. I find esoeroticism to be so effective because it's in the body. And so you're also releasing through your movement a lot of trapped and stored old stories and emotions and energies as well. But chaos magic here, I brought some books because it's funny, because chaos magic is actually pretty simple, and a lot of people, it's just how we are as humans. We want to overthink it. And how there are volumes and volumes and volumes on chaos magic, I don't understand, because at its essence, it's non-dogmatic, it's non-unified. I literally just explained its essence. You have a will, you create a will, you find a way into gnosis, and you find a way to implant that will. It's all based on proven science, the science of neuroplasticity. It's why hypnosis works. If you want to read more about chaos magic, if you're hot for it, Libernal, if you're watching, this is Libernal and Psychonaut. This is like the Bible by Peter J. Carroll. This is like the Bible of chaos magic. It's not like the most fun thing to read, I'm not going to lie. But why? Here's the thing with chaos magic and why we become more powerful in our magic when we don't just leave it at that. This is why, like in the multiverse, for example, our virtual membership, we still learn like our planetary associations and our elemental magic and all of our associations, because these are how you get really creative with your chaos magic. And say, if you know that what the energy of Jupiter is, and then if you know where Jupiter is in your natal chart and if it's being activated, if you know that, you can use your chaos magic to amplify that, And so, yeah, if you want to read more, it's not the most fun book, but they do talk more about just like regular magical things as well. If you want a more readable book, I really like this one. It's called Hands-On Chaos Magic. It's by Andre Vinimus. And this, again, he has just a lot of creative approaches and a lot of creative practices that he's developed based on chaos magic. He has lots of different ways to do sigils. He talks about, sigils don't just have to be written. He talks about spoken sigils in that one as well. So that's a good one. If you want some online resources and you want some girl power, I love Kellyanne Maddox and Ivy Corvus. You can just Google Kellyanne Maddox or Ivy Corvus, Chaos Magic, and they will come up. But check out their work. But I've learned a lot from them. I've learned a lot from these books, and I've learned a lot from my own self-study. Again, it's a sovereign practice. You can't tell me that something works until you can tell me something works, but it can only become my truth if I do it and I see results. And with esoeroticism, over and over again, we see results, and people can't put words to it. They're like, I don't understand when I come take class with you, it's different. Or I don't understand when I come to your studio and take a class under a trained instructor, why it feels different, why I want to keep coming back to that class. And I can say, because you're actually experiencing the internal shift. It's not sexy dance. It's so much more than sexy dance. It is a ritual. When you come and take an esoerotic experience, you are moving through a magical ritual, and it is all based on being guided very intentionally into a state of gnosis, and you doing all the magic yourself. You're the magic. You're the one that's doing the movement, that's feeling a very authentic, empowered way. And then through that, you're claiming that as your new truth, essentially. And so, yes, I said I would talk about I teach this. And I have, starting in February, I'm going to do it once a year because I'm doing a regular certification, a 1.0 certification, where essentially I teach dark feminine magic and the Esoerotic ritual technique, which is based in Chaos Magick. So if you're like, this sounds really cool, I already do my own thing, but I would love to know how I can weave this Chaos Magick into what I do. Esoerotic 1.0 certification. It is a 3-month online virtual certification. It is primo. I've done it a few times. I keep making it even better and better and better. And so would love for you to join for that. You can join from anywhere in the world. And if you're like, no, but I want to actually learn esoeroticism specifically, I would love to teach esoeroticism. I want to know your moves. I want to know your class structures. I want to start guiding other people myself through this. Then we have the 2.0 certification. It includes the 1.0 certification. So you'll get all of that fun stuff first, but then you're going to be certified to teach it and to lead other people through this magical movement modality. And so both of those start early February 2026. So go on our website, esoerotic.com, look under certifications. I think it's 2026 certifications. You'll get all the info there. But I really encourage you to start to play with this and notice in your life where you may find that you slip into states of gnosis. And I will say that you have to be an active participant in it. So like I said, it's not when you're just like la-di-da-di-da. It's really, it's very similar to a state of flow when you are doing something where you are so single focused that everything else fades away. How esoerotic gnosis feels is you just danced and moved and felt so fucking good in your body for like a song, and you don't even know what you did, and you don't even know where you're like, you lost track of space and time, and you're like, wait, what did I just do? What happened? That means you entered a state of esoerotic gnosis. That means you just did a powerful rewriting of your internal self. And that is very powerful. And it's very powerful resistance against a society that wants us to feel shame around our bodies and shame around our sexuality and wants us to not live fully in our power. I always end all of our esoerotic beginner experiences with a reminder, if you don't own your body, you don't own your sexuality, someone else can. One of the biggest cons in this world is shaming us of this so we can be controlled and not live fully in our power. And this is the power I'm talking about. Owning these aspects of ourselves make us so uncontrollable. And believe me, that is where I think we all need to be, in a state of resistance to whatever these desirous overlords right now. So we want to change paradigms. We have to start with ourselves, and we have to start internally. So with that, I hope you have a better understanding of Chaos Magick. If you are still like, but yeah, like, where do you meet? But like, who's the president of who's the priest or the priestess or whatever? You're returning to dogmatic structures. There is no council of chaos magicians that get to decide what we all believe and what we don't believe. You don't need to be initiated into it. You don't. Like, you can just initiate yourself. you can believe and have different spells and rituals than I do that work for you, that and you may not really enjoy my form of ritualistic practices, so it can be a lot for people who are so used to their whole life being told what they should believe. you get to decide for yourself and you get to experience for yourself. And to me, that's the future of spirituality. Like, guru culture's dead, baby. I'm over it. And I'm sure you are too if you're listening to this. So I'm babbling, which I tend to do when I get excited. I just love this modality. I love movement plus magic. I want you to experience it. So come take a class. We're virtual in the multiverse. You can join from anywhere. If you want to apply this to your own thing, come take certification. Got some retreats coming in 2026. It's all going to be pure magic, baby. So with that, I love you. Mwah. Stay in your magic, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye. Thank you for joining. Follow me on Instagram at crimson.minx and visit esoerotic.com to learn to live more fully and unapologetically in your magnetic power, sensual pleasure, and unlimited creative potential.